Rain poured over the quiet streets of a small American town as a 12-year-old boy ran through the darkness, clutching a worn backpack tightly against his chest. His shoes were soaked, his hands trembled from the cold, but he refused to slow down. He wasn't running from danger. He was running toward the only person who had ever believed in him, his mother. Inside the local hospital, doctors were doing everything they could to keep her alive. Every second felt heavier than the last. The boy's heart pounded with fear as he whispered the same words over and over again. "Please don't leave me. I still need you." No one in that hospital knew the incredible journey that had brought him there. No one knew the promise he had made years before, and no one could imagine how far he was willing to go to keep that promise. This is the unforgettable story of a boy who refused to give up on the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. A story about love, hope, determination, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. Chapter 1. A Home Filled with Love. The boy's name was Ethan Carter, and he lived in a modest neighborhood outside Chicago, Illinois. Their tiny house wasn't beautiful. The roof leaked whenever it rained, the furniture was old, and the kitchen barely had enough food for 2 people. But to Ethan, it was the safest place in the world, because every evening his mother, Sarah Carter, greeted him with the warmest smile anyone could ever imagine. Sarah worked 2 exhausting jobs. She cleaned offices during the day and stocked shelves at a grocery store. Late into the night, most nights she returned home after midnight, her feet aching, her hands rough from hard work. Yet she always found the strength to kiss Ethan on the forehead before going to bed. She never complained. Instead, she smiled and said, "As long as you're smiling, my day was worth it." Ethan never understood how someone could be so tired and still be so kind. As he grew older, he realized the answer. She wasn't living for herself anymore. She was living for him. Every dollar she earned went toward his school supplies, warm clothes, books, and meals. When money ran short, Sarah quietly skipped dinner, pretending she had already eaten at work. Ethan believed her, until one night. He woke up thirsty and walked into the kitchen. There he found his mother sitting alone at the table, drinking nothing but a cup of hot water. There wasn't any food left. She had given the last meal to him. That was the night Ethan silently made a promise that would shape the rest of his life. One day, "Mom, I'll take care of you, no matter what it takes." He didn't know how. He didn't know when. But he knew one thing for certain. He would never stop trying. The next morning, Ethan woke before the sun had risen. The house was silent except for the soft ticking of an old clock hanging on the kitchen wall. He quietly walked into his mother's room and found Sarah asleep in a chair, still wearing her work uniform. She had been too exhausted to even make it to her bed. A wave of guilt washed over him. He carefully placed a worn blanket over her shoulders and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." From that day on, something changed inside Ethan. While most boys his age dreamed about video games, bicycles, or weekends at the movies, Ethan had only one dream: to make life easier for his mother. At school, however, life was anything but easy. His clothes were faded from years of use. His backpack had been stitched together more times than he could count, and his sneakers had small holes that let in rain whenever the weather turned bad. Some classmates noticed. A few laughed. One afternoon during lunch, a group of boys gathered around him. "Did you get those shoes from a museum?" One of them joked, another laughed. Maybe his family can't even afford dinner. The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Ethan looked down at his tray and said nothing. He had learned that sometimes silence was stronger than anger, but inside, every word hurt. When school ended, he slowly walked home, trying to hide the tears in his eyes. As soon as he opened the front door, Sarah greeted him with her usual smile. "How was school today?" Ethan forced a smile. It was great. He lied because he couldn't bear to make her worry. Sarah had enough burdens already. That evening, while she prepared a simple dinner of soup and bread, Ethan noticed her coughing again. It wasn't an ordinary cough. It was deeper, longer, painful. She quickly turned away, pretending everything was fine. "Just a little cold," she said. But Ethan wasn't convinced. Over the next several weeks, the cough became worse. Sometimes Sarah struggled to catch her breath after climbing the stairs. Still, she refused to miss a single day of work. "We need every paycheck," she would say with a gentle smile. One Saturday morning, Ethan secretly followed her after she left the house. He watched from across the street as she spent hours cleaning office buildings. She scrubbed floors, emptied trash bins, carried heavy boxes, and worked until her hands shook with exhaustion. Later that evening, instead of going home, she walked to the grocery store for her second job. She didn't sit down once. By the time she finally returned home after midnight, she could barely keep her eyes open. Hidden behind a tree, Ethan felt his heart break. He had never truly understood how much she sacrificed. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and made another promise to himself. "I'm not going to wait until I'm an adult. I'm going to help now." The next morning, Ethan began looking for small jobs around the neighborhood. He mowed lawns, he washed cars, he carried groceries for elderly neighbors, he walked dogs after school. Some people paid him a few dollars. Others gave him nothing more than a sandwich and a smile. He accepted everything with gratitude. Every dollar he earned went into an old metal cookie tin hidden beneath his bed. He never spent a single cent on himself. Weeks turned into months. The tin slowly filled with crumpled bills and loose change. Then one evening, Sarah discovered it while cleaning Ethan's room. She opened the box and froze. There were hundreds of dollars inside. Confused, she turned to Ethan. "Where did this money come from?" Ethan lowered his head. "I've been working after school. I wanted to help you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sarah wrapped her arms around her son and held him tightly. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You're still just a child," she whispered. "No," Ethan replied softly. "I'm your son, and I'll never let you fight alone." Sarah cried harder than she had in years. She realized that somewhere along the way, the little boy she had raised had become the strongest person she knew. But neither of them knew that life was about to test their courage even more. Just a few days later, Sarah collapsed at work. The call came just after 3 o'clock on a cold Thursday afternoon. Ethan was sitting in his math class when the classroom door opened. His teacher looked at him with a worried expression. "Ethan," she said softly, "please bring your backpack. The principal needs to speak with you." The room fell silent. As Ethan walked into the hallway, his heart began to race. He had never been called to the principal's office in the middle of class before. When he arrived, the school principal was standing beside a police officer. The officer removed his hat and spoke gently. "Ethan, your mother collapsed at work. An ambulance has taken her to the hospital." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. "What?" Ethan whispered, unable to believe what he had just heard. "She's alive," the officer reassured him, "but the doctors need to examine her. We'll take you there now." Without saying another word, Ethan climbed into the police car. During the drive, he stared silently out the window as snowflakes drifted through the gray afternoon sky. His hands shook uncontrollably. He kept repeating the same prayer in his mind. "Please let my mom be okay, please." The hospital when they arrived. Ethan rushed through the hospital doors and searched every hallway until a nurse stopped him. "Are you Ethan Carter?" He nodded quickly. "Your mother is awake, but the doctor would like to speak with you first." Moments later, a middle-aged doctor invited Ethan into a quiet consultation room. He sat across from the frightened boy and folded his hands. "Ethan," he began, "your mother has been pushing herself far beyond what her body can handle. She has severe pneumonia, extreme exhaustion, and signs of heart strain. If she continues working the way she has been, her condition could become life-threatening." The words echoed in Ethan's mind. Life-threatening. He felt as though the air had been pulled from the room. "But she'll get better, right?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. The doctor paused before answering. "She can recover, but only if she gets proper treatment, rest, and medication. Unfortunately, recovery may take several months." Ethan's thoughts immediately turned to one thing: money. How much will it cost? The doctor hesitated. Even with assistance, the medical bills, tests, and medications could cost thousands of dollars. Thousands. It was more money than Ethan had ever imagined. A mother's smile. When Ethan finally entered Sarah's hospital room, She greeted him with the same gentle smile she had worn his entire life. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I scared you." Ethan walked to her bedside and held her hand tightly. "You don't have to apologize." Sarah noticed the tears in his eyes. Everything will be okay, but Ethan knew she was trying to comfort him instead of herself. He looked at the machines surrounding her bed, the IV connected to her arm and the exhaustion on her face. For the first time in his life, his mother looked fragile. A difficult decision. 2 days later, Sarah was discharged from the hospital. The doctor gave one final warning. No heavy lifting, no long work shifts, no physical stress. Rest for at least 3 months. The next morning, Ethan woke before dawn. The house was cold and the refrigerator was nearly empty. He quietly made oatmeal for his mother and left a handwritten note beside her breakfast. "Please stay home today. I'll be back after school. I love you." Sarah smiled when she found the note, but deep inside she worried. She knew Ethan was carrying a burden no child should ever have to bear. At school, Ethan couldn't concentrate. Numbers on the whiteboard blurred together as he kept thinking about the unpaid bills waiting at home. After the final bell rang, he didn't head home. Instead, he walked through the busy streets of downtown Chicago, searching every storefront for a "Help Wanted" sign. He entered a bakery. "Sorry," the manager said. "You have to be at least 16. He tried a grocery store. "We're not hiring." A car wash, a hardware store, a flower shop. Every answer was the same. No. By sunset, Ethan's legs ached from walking. His hope was beginning to fade. As he passed a small neighborhood library, he noticed an elderly man struggling to carry several heavy boxes up the front steps. Without hesitation, Ethan ran over. "Sir, let me help you." The old man smiled gratefully. "Thank you, young man." Together they carried the boxes inside. When they finished, the man extended his hand. "My name is Mr. Benjamin Harris. I'm the head librarian. Ethan Carter." Mr. Harris noticed Ethan's tired face. "You look like you've had a long day." For the first time, Ethan told someone the truth. He explained his mother's illness, their financial struggles, and his desperate search for work. The elderly librarian listened without interrupting. When Ethan finished, Mr. Harris remained silent for a moment. Then he smiled. "I may not have a full-time job for you, but I do have something better." Ethan looked at him curiously. Mr. Harris walked toward an old computer in the corner of the library. "Do you know how to use one of these?" "A little," Ethan admitted. The librarian nodded. "The future belongs to people who know how to learn. If you're willing to work hard, I'll teach you everything I know for free." Every afternoon after school, Ethan began spending hours at the library. Mr. Harris taught him how to type faster, how to write clearly, how to research information, how to use computers, how to solve problems. Most importantly, he taught Ethan something that no amount of money could buy. "Skills," he said one evening, "can never be taken away from you." Months passed. Ethan became the library's most dedicated student. He helped organize books, cleaned shelves, assisted visitors, and learned something new every single day. One afternoon, Mr. Harris handed him an old laptop. "It's not new," he said with a smile, "but it still works." Ethan stared at it in disbelief. "I can't accept this." "Yes, you can. But it's worth too much." Mr. Harris shook his head. "It's worthless sitting in my storage room." Then he looked Ethan directly in the eyes. "But in your hands, it might change your future." That evening, Ethan carried the laptop home as though it were the greatest treasure in the world. When Sarah saw it, she smiled proudly. "I've never seen you this excited." Ethan laughed for the first time in weeks. "I think this is the beginning of something." Neither of them realized just how true those words would become. Within weeks, Ethan would discover an opportunity that could completely change their lives, but it would also come with risks, setbacks, and challenges he had never imagined. A few weeks after receiving the old laptop, Ethan's daily routine completely changed. Every morning, he went to school. Every afternoon, he helped at the library. Every evening, he rushed home to check on his mother. And every night after Sarah had fallen asleep, he opened the old laptop and taught himself new skills. Sometimes he stayed awake until 2 or 3 in the morning. He watched free lessons on writing, basic graphic design, and computer skills. Whenever he didn't understand something, He wrote it down in a notebook and asked Mr. Harris the next day. "You learn faster than anyone I've ever met," Mr. Harris said with a proud smile. Ethan replied, "I don't have a choice. My mom needs me." One afternoon, while searching online, Ethan found a small website where people hired freelancers for simple tasks like writing short articles, organizing data, and creating basic designs. The payments weren't huge, but to Ethan, they looked like a miracle. He created a profile and waited. One day passed, then another. A week later, still no one hired him. He began to wonder if he was wasting his time. Just as he was about to give up, a notification appeared on his screen. "Congratulations, you've received your first job offer." His heart raced. The task was simple. Write a short article for a local business. The payment was only $20. To many people, it wasn't much. To Ethan, it meant groceries for several days. He worked carefully, checking every sentence again and again before submitting it. The next morning, another notification appeared. "Excellent work. Payment has been sent." Ethan could hardly believe it. He had earned his first online income. That evening, instead of telling his mother, he quietly stopped at a grocery store on the way home. He bought fresh vegetables, chicken, milk, bread, and Sarah's favorite apples. When he walked through the front door carrying the bags, Sarah looked confused. "Ethan, where did all this come from?" He smiled. "I earned it." She stared at him in disbelief. "You did?" He nodded proudly. "It's my first paycheck." Sarah hugged him tightly, tears filling her eyes. "I've always believed in you," she whispered. "But I never imagined you'd grow up this fast." Over the next few months, Ethan continued working. One job became 2, then 5, then 10. Little by little, their situation improved. For the first time in years, the refrigerator stayed full. The rent was paid on time. Sarah could finally focus on recovering instead of worrying every single day. But success brought new challenges. One evening, Ethan received an email offering him a much larger project worth $2,000. It was more money than he had ever seen. The message looked real. The client sounded professional. It seemed like the opportunity he had been waiting for. Without realizing it, Ethan was about to face the biggest mistake of his young life. The email looked perfect. The company logo appeared professional. The writing was polished, and the payment, $2,000, felt almost too good to be true. The client claimed to own a growing marketing agency and said he had been impressed by Ethan's previous work. Complete. "This project in 7 days," the message read, "and you'll receive full payment immediately." Ethan's heart raced with excitement. $2,000 could pay months of rent, cover his mother's medication, and finally give them some breathing room. Without thinking twice, he accepted the offer. For the next week, he barely slept. He woke up early for school, studied during the day, helped his mother in the evening, and worked late into the night. Every sentence, every detail, every revision had to be perfect. On the 7th day, he clicked submit, then he waited. 1 day passed, no reply. 2 days. Still nothing. By the end of the week, the client's profile had disappeared. The email bounced back. The account was gone. Ethan had been scammed. He sat frozen in front of the laptop, staring at the empty screen. A week's worth of hard work, gone. No payment, no explanation, no way to recover it. For the first time in months, Ethan felt completely defeated. That evening, Sarah noticed something was wrong. "You've hardly spoken all day," she said gently. Ethan tried to smile, but he couldn't. Finally, he told her everything. He expected her to be disappointed. Instead, she sat beside him and held his hand. "Do you know how many times I failed before I learned anything?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "More times than I can count." She smiled. "Failure isn't the opposite of success, Ethan. It's often the path that leads to it." Those words stayed with him. The next morning, he returned to the library. When Mr. Harris heard what had happened, he nodded knowingly. "Scammers prey on hopeful people," he said. "But don't let one dishonest person convince you that the whole world is dishonest." Then he handed Ethan a notebook. Inside were pages of advice, Always research clients. Never trust offers that seem too good to be true. Build long-term relationships, not quick money. Protect your work and your time. Ethan read every page carefully. That day, he made another promise, not just to his mother, but to himself. I won't let one mistake decide my future. Over the following months, he rebuilt his reputation from the ground up. He completed small jobs honestly. Clients began leaving 5-star reviews. They recommended him to others. Slowly, his income became steady. One evening, while checking his messages, he received a call from a real business owner. "I've been reading your reviews," the woman said. "I'd like to hire you for a long-term project." This time, Ethan didn't rush. He verified the company. He asked questions. He read every detail of the contract. Everything was genuine. As he signed the agreement, he smiled. He had learned an important lesson. Success wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about refusing to quit after failing. That night, as Sarah looked healthier than she had in months, Ethan allowed himself to believe that brighter days were finally ahead. But life still had one more heartbreaking challenge waiting for them. A challenge that would test their love more than ever. Before nearly a year had passed since Sarah collapsed at work, life wasn't perfect, but it had finally begun to feel hopeful. Thanks to Ethan's hard work, the bills were no longer piling up on the kitchen table. The refrigerator stayed full, the lights stayed on, and Sarah had regained much of her strength. For the first time in years, she smiled without hiding her worries. One Saturday morning, they shared breakfast together. The sound of the ambulance sirens echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Ethan knelt beside his mother, holding her hand as the paramedics worked quickly. "Stay with me, Mom," he pleaded, his voice shaking. "Please, don't close your eyes." Sarah tried to smile, but she was too weak to speak. Minutes later, the ambulance sped toward the hospital with Ethan sitting beside her, praying harder than he had ever prayed before, waiting for an answer. The emergency room was filled with doctors and nurses rushing from one patient to another. Ethan could only watch as they wheeled his mother through the double doors, then they disappeared. The waiting room suddenly felt enormous. Every second felt like an hour. He stared at the floor, remembering every moment of his childhood. His mother's laughter, her bedtime stories, the way she always believed in him even when the world didn't. "Please," he whispered. "You fought your whole life. Don't stop now." After what felt like forever, a doctor finally walked toward him. "Ethan Carter?" He stood immediately. "How is she?" The doctor sighed. "Your mother suffered a serious heart attack." Ethan's knees nearly gave out, but we were able to stabilize her. Relief flooded through him, but only for a moment. "There is still a problem," the doctor continued. "Her heart has been weakened by years of stress, exhaustion, and untreated health issues. She will need a major operation." Ethan swallowed hard. "Will she survive?" The doctor answered honestly. "The surgery gives her the best chance. Without it, her condition will continue to worsen." A difficult truth. The estimated cost of the operation was far more than Ethan had saved. Even with insurance assistance and charitable programs, there was still a large amount left to pay. That night, Ethan sat alone in the hospital chapel. For the first time since he was a little boy, he cried, not because he was weak, but because he felt powerless. An elderly woman sitting nearby quietly handed him a tissue. "Someone you love?" she asked. "My mom," she smiled kindly. "My husband once told me something I'll never forget. Hope isn't believing that life will be easy. Hope is believing that love is stronger than fear." Those words gave Ethan the strength to stand up. Again, the community steps. And the next morning, something unexpected happened. Mr. Harris, the librarian, arrived at the hospital. Then Ethan's teachers, neighbors, former clients, even people who barely knew the Carter family. They had heard what happened. One by one, they offered help. Some brought meals, some donated money, others simply offered words of encouragement. Mr. Harris placed an envelope in Ethan's hands. "This community watched your mother spend years helping others," he said. "Now, it's our turn to help her." Ethan opened the envelope. Inside were hundreds of handwritten notes from people whose lives Sarah had quietly touched. Over the years, one note read, "She bought groceries for my family when we couldn't afford food. Another said, she stayed late after work to comfort me after I lost my husband. Another simply read, she never knew it, but her kindness saved my life. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. He had always known his mother was kind. He had never realized how many lives she had changed. A ray of hope within days. The donations, combined with Ethan's savings and available assistance, were enough to move forward with the surgery. As Sarah was wheeled toward the operating room, she reached for Ethan's hand. If anything happens, he gently interrupted her. No, she smiled, weakly. You've made me the proudest mother in the world. Ethan leaned forward and hugged her, carefully. I haven't kept my promise yet, he whispered. I'm still going to give you the life you've always deserved. Sarah smiled through tears as the doors slowly closed behind her. Ethan watched until she disappeared from sight. Then he sat alone outside the operating room, waiting, praying, hoping, not knowing whether the next time he saw his mother, she would open her eyes. The red light above the operating room remained on. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 4. Every time the doors opened, Ethan jumped to his feet, hoping to hear good news. But it was always another doctor, another nurse, another patient. The waiting felt endless. Mr. Harris sat quietly beside him. You don't have to be strong every second, he said gently. Ethan stared at the floor. I'm not afraid of working hard, he whispered. I'm only afraid of losing the only family I have. Mr. Harris placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Your mother has spent her whole life fighting for you. Now she's fighting to come back to you. The news after nearly 6 hours. The lead surgeon finally walked into the waiting room. His surgical mask was lowered, and there was a tired smile on his face. Ethan Carter? Ethan stood so quickly that his chair tipped over. Your mother's surgery was successful. For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The words echoed in his mind. Successful. His eyes filled with tears as he covered his face with his hands. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you so much. The surgeon nodded. The next few weeks will be important. She'll need rest, medication, and rehabilitation. But if everything continues to go well, she has an excellent chance of making a full recovery. It was the best news Ethan had heard in years. Coming home. Several weeks later, Sarah finally returned home. The little house looked different. Fresh paint covered the old walls. The broken porch had been repaired. A small flower garden bloomed in the front. Yard neighbors had volunteered their time while she was in the hospital. When Sarah stepped out of the car, she looked around in amazement. You did all this? Ethan smiled. I had a little help. Sarah looked at the flowers and quietly wiped away a tear. This is the most beautiful home in the world. It always was, Ethan replied. You were just too busy taking care of me to notice. A new beginning months passed. Ethan started college on his scholarship while continuing to work online in the evenings. His reputation grew. Soon, he wasn't just completing projects, he was leading them. He eventually started a small digital business, hiring other students who needed flexible work to support their families. He never forgot where he came from. Every Christmas, he organized food drives for struggling families. Every summer, he donated school supplies to children in need. And every weekend, no matter how busy he became, he visited his mother. One afternoon, Sarah sat on the porch, watching the sunset. You know, she said softly, when you were little, I worried that I couldn't give you everything. Ethan smiled. You gave me everything that mattered. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. What was that? He took her hand. You taught me that real wealth isn't measured by money. It's measured by love, sacrifice, and never giving up on the people who believe in you. Sarah hugged her son tightly. I'm proud of the man you've become, Ethan smiled through his tears. I became this man because of you. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, mother and son sat together in peaceful silence. The promise Ethan had made as a little boy had finally come true. He had never given up on his mother, and because he never gave up, he didn't just save her life. She had saved his first, the end.